Christmas dinner at my parents' house had always been a rehearsal. Same tablecloth ironed to a crease, same candles that never fully burned down because my mother extinguished them before they could make a mess. Same assigned seats that no one questioned, as if the chairs themselves enforced the hierarchy. My brother sat at the head of the table when my father wasn't using it, and that night, my father was using it, which meant my brother sat to his right, close enough to whisper and be heard. I had flown in 2 days earlier from a 6-month rotation off the coast of Louisiana. Petroleum engineering didn't exactly come with a flexible schedule, and the offshore platform didn't care about holidays or family dynamics. When I was away, I was gone. No cell signal for stretches. No ability to monitor bank accounts in real time. No way to know what was happening back home unless someone told me. My brother had always been the one to tell me. That was the arrangement. That was the trust. I was still jet-lagged when I sat down to dinner, still carrying that hollow feeling that comes from being stationary after months of motion. My mother asked me twice if I was eating enough. My father gave me the nod he reserved for people he respected but didn't know how to talk to. My brother's wife passed the rolls without making eye contact, and then my brother tapped the side of his glass. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The table went quiet the way it always did when he wanted it to, the way rooms always did around him. He had that quality, the ability to command attention without appearing to demand it. He'd had it since childhood, and our parents had fed it like a flame. He said he had something to share. Good news, he called it. His voice was warm and self-satisfied in equal measure, the tone of a man who had already decided how the room would react before he opened his mouth. He looked across the table at me when he said it. Not to include me, to watch me. I've been managing the Hargrove portfolio since Dad's procedure last spring, he said, meaning the investment properties our grandfather had left to our family. The market was perfect. We had an interested buyer for the Clearwater unit and the Riverside duplex. I moved on it. My mother reached for his arm. Both of them? My father asked. Both of them. Combined sale, $940,000. Clean close, no contingencies. He lifted his glass, to the family. My fork was still in my hand. I hadn't moved. The sound of the room had gone strange, like everything was being heard through water. You sold them, I said. He looked at me like I was slow to understand something obvious. I had the authority. Dad signed over management rights when he was recovering. It was the right call. Those units were in my name too, I said. They were in the family trust, he said, with the ease of someone who had rehearsed the distinction. Dad's signature was sufficient. My mother nodded. My father looked at his plate. My brother's wife refilled her wine. I wanted to ask more. I wanted to understand exactly what documents had been signed and what my name had appeared on and what account the $940,000 had been deposited into. But something stopped me. Not shock. Something colder. Something that felt like instinct catching up to a truth I hadn't known I already suspected. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it. My brother was still talking, explaining something about reinvestment strategies and how the family debt from my father's medical bills was now cleared. He made it sound like generosity. He made it sound like sacrifice. My phone buzzed again. I excused myself from the table. The hallway was quiet and smelled like pine cleaner, and the candle my mother had lit near the stairs. I looked at the screen. Unknown number. I answered because something in me already knew I needed to. The woman on the other end identified herself as Agent Diana Reyes with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. She spoke quickly but clearly. She said they had flagged unusual wire transfers connected to a property sale under my name and asked whether I had authorized a transaction involving 2 addresses in Clearwater and Riverside. I leaned against the wall and looked back down the hallway toward the dining room, where I could hear my brother laughing at something. No, I said. I didn't authorize anything. There was a brief pause. Then we need to speak with you formally. Can you remain available this evening? Don't leave? I asked. Don't leave, she confirmed. I went back to the table, sat down, picked up my fork. My brother glanced at me. Everything okay? Fine, I said. Go ahead. He smiled and kept talking. The rest of dinner was something I absorbed rather than participated in. I watched my brother the way you watch someone from a distance, cataloging details you hadn't thought to notice before. The way he touched his collar when he mentioned account numbers. The way he looked at my father when my father started asking questions, a quick redirect, practiced. The way his wife never spoke about the sale directly but nodded at every appropriate moment. By the time dessert came, I had a clearer picture of something I hadn't wanted to see. My father asked about my work, I answered. My mother talked about the neighbors. My brother circled back to the money twice more, framing it differently each time. By the third version, he had somehow become the architect of the family's financial recovery, the son who stayed and handled things while I was gone. I nodded along, patient. Outside, it started to rain. When dinner ended and my parents moved to the living room, I stayed in the kitchen under the pretense of helping clean up. My brother's wife was rinsing dishes. My brother had poured himself a second drink and was standing near the window, watching the rain like he owned the view. He said, without turning around, "You're upset." "I'm processing," I said. It was the right move. "You would have agreed if you'd been reachable." I looked at him. I was reachable. You had my satellite number. He turned then, and something shifted behind his eyes. Just briefly. These decisions don't wait for offshore rotations. These decisions weren't yours to make alone. His wife stopped rinsing. The kitchen went very still. "You've been gone 7 months," he said, voice even. Somebody had to manage things. "And the $940,000, I said. "Where exactly is it?" He smiled. The kind of smile that closes a conversation rather than inviting one. "In the family account. I'll show you the statements next week." I nodded once and went to bed. I didn't sleep. Agent Reyes arrived the next morning. She came alone, no unmarked car, no visible badge until I asked. She sat across from me at the kitchen table while my parents were still asleep and laid out what she could share at that stage. The Clearwater unit and the Riverside duplex had been sold through a title company that was currently under investigation for facilitating fraudulent property transactions. My name appeared on the deed transfer documents with a signature that did not match any known sample on record. My father's management authority, it turned out, covered operational decisions, not asset liquidation. The sale had required my signature. It had not gotten it. Someone had forged it anyway. The money had been deposited into an account under the family trust name, but a secondary transfer had occurred within 72 hours. A portion, $460,000, had moved to a private investment account registered in my brother's name through a financial services firm in Delaware. She showed me the document. I looked at the signature they had on file as mine. The handwriting was close. Not perfect, but close. The way something looks when someone has copied it from memory rather than from life. I recognized the slight angle on the capital letters. The specific way the tail of my last name curved. Things a stranger wouldn't know. Things a brother would. "He practiced," I said quietly. Reyes didn't confirm or deny. She asked me questions instead, careful and methodical. Had I given verbal authorization? Had I sent any written communications about the sale? Had I ever given my brother access to my financial accounts independently of the family trust? No. 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 She left me with a card and asked me not to confront him directly. I sat at the table after she was gone for a long time, listening to the house wake up around me. My father came down first. He looked older in the morning light than he had at dinner. He poured coffee without speaking, then sat across from me and wrapped both hands around his mug. "You know," he said. "Tell me what I know," I said. He looked out the window. Marcus needed it. The business debt was real. My bills were real. He said you would understand. "Did I sign anything, Dad?" He didn't answer. "Did I sign anything?" I asked again. He said you gave verbal approval before your last rotation. I did not. He set down his mug. His hands were shaking slightly. "He's your brother." "He stole from me," I said. "And you let him." My mother appeared in the doorway then, already dressed, already composed. She looked at my father first, a quick assessment, then at me. Her expression was the one she used when she wanted to manage a situation before it became one. "Let's not do this before anyone's had breakfast," she said. "I don't need breakfast," I said. "I need to know what you both signed and what you knew." She sat down slowly. She reached for my father's hand. And in that gesture, I had my answer before she spoke a single word. She said they had signed a document Marcus brought them 3 months earlier. He'd explained it as a routine administrative update to the trust. He said it was standard practice for asset-heavy family portfolios. He had their power of attorney notarized through someone he knew. The FBI had already flagged the notary. Turns out the license had expired 6 months prior, and the individual had been involved in 2 other fraud cases in neighboring counties. That afternoon, I called Agent Reyes. I told her about my parents. I told her about the breakfast conversation. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she said quietly that what I was doing was difficult and that the case was stronger because of it. I didn't feel strong. I felt like someone standing in a house they'd thought was solid and watching the walls reveal how long the rot had been spreading. I drove to get coffee I didn't need, just to have somewhere to put my hands and eyes. The town looked exactly like it always had, the same streets, the same storefronts, the same sense that nothing dramatic ever happened here. The barista asked if I was visiting for the holidays. I said yes. She said that was nice. I agreed that it was. On the way back, I pulled over outside the old duplex on Riverside. The sale had closed 5 weeks ago. A young couple had moved in. I could see a wreath on the door and a set of bikes in the driveway. The kind you buy when you've just moved somewhere and you're optimistic about the neighborhood. They hadn't done anything wrong. They'd purchased a home through what looked like a legal transaction, and had no way of knowing that the signature authorizing it had been copied from a birthday card. I sat there until it started to rain again, then drove back. My brother came to find me that evening. He knocked on the guest room door like a reasonable man and stood in the doorway with his arms crossed and his voice at its most measured and rational. He said he understood I was upset. He said the decision had been made under difficult circumstances. He said our father's health had required action that couldn't wait for my schedule. I let him talk. He was good at it, always had been, the kind of articulate that sounds like logic even when it isn't. When he finished, I asked him about the Delaware account. His expression didn't change. That was almost impressive. That's a separate investment vehicle, he said. The family will benefit from it long term. $460,000, I said, with your name on it. I manage the investments. My name facilitates the management. Your name facilitates ownership, I said. He recrossed his arms. You've always needed everything explained twice. Then explain it twice, I said. Explain why my signature appears on a deed transfer that I never signed. Something flickered, very brief. Signatures can be granted through agents. I never granted you agency. Dad did. Dad's authority didn't extend to selling my assets. You knew that. He looked at me for a long moment, the way someone looks at a door they thought was unlocked. You're going to make this ugly, he said. You already made it ugly, I said. I'm just not pretending otherwise. He left without saying anything else. I heard him on the phone in the hallway 20 minutes later, his voice low and controlled. I couldn't make out the words, but the cadence was the one he used when he was managing something, redirecting it, shaping how it would be received somewhere else. I texted Reyes. He's been warned. He knows I know. She responded within minutes. We've been monitoring his communications. Don't be alone with him. That night I sat by the window in the guest room and thought about what it costs to trust someone without evidence. Not the blind kind of trust, not the naive kind, the earned kind. The kind you build over years of shared history and holidays and phone calls from offshore platforms. The kind that doesn't think to ask for documentation, because documentation feels like an accusation. My brother had understood that long before I did. Reyes called 2 days later with a development. A woman who had worked at the title company had agreed to cooperate with the investigation. She confirmed that the signature on the transfer documents had been brought in physically on a separate form and transferred to the official documents after the fact. Standard fraud methodology, she said. She'd seen it before but hadn't been certain enough to flag it at the time. She was certain now. Reyes also confirmed that the Delaware account had been opened 4 months before the sale, preemptive, structured, waiting. My brother hadn't reacted to an opportunity. He had created one and waited for the right conditions. I kept that information close and said nothing to anyone in the house. My mother tried twice to have what she called a family conversation. I declined both times. My father avoided me with the specific kind of avoidance that belongs to people who know they participated in something they can't quite name. He would start sentences and trail off. He would look at me from across rooms and then find something else to look at. My brother moved through the house like nothing had shifted, which told me more about him than anything else. On the 4th night, Reyes called again. We're ready to move, she said, but we need you somewhere specific. She explained what she needed. A dinner. My parents' house. My brother present. They had enough to act, but the timing mattered. and having the family assembled would close certain procedural gaps. She said I didn't have to do it. She said the case was solid either way. I told her I'd do it. My mother was genuinely pleased when I suggested we have a proper sit-down dinner before I flew back. She spent the better part of a day cooking. My brother arrived with wine, and that same ease he always carried, like a coat he had never once needed to take off. We sat down. My mother talked about the neighbors. My father asked about my next rotation schedule. My brother poured wine for everyone without being asked and made a toast to family. I ate slowly and watched him. Halfway through the main course, he said something that made my mother laugh and reached across to touch my father's arm, the gesture of a man completely comfortable in the role he had constructed for himself. He looked at me once, and I smiled back, and he seemed satisfied by that, reading it as surrender or acceptance or whatever made the most sense to him. The knock came just before 9. Not urgent, not angry. 3 firm, measured knocks. My brother's fork paused. Expecting someone? He asked my mother. She shook her head, already rising. I'll get it, I said. I stood slowly. My brother watched me cross the room. I could feel his attention sharpening behind me. When I opened the door, Agent Reyes was standing on the porch with 2 other agents. She held up her credentials without being asked. Behind her, in the driveway, 2 vehicles were parked with their lights off. Rain had started again, soft and steady. Miss Callahan, she said. Is Marcus Callahan present? Behind me, I heard his chair. You have got to be kidding me, he said. I stepped aside. The next few minutes happened in pieces, my mother's hand going to her mouth. My father standing and then sitting again. Reyes walking into the dining room with a calm that made the whole house feel smaller. My brother standing at the head of the table, the way he always stood when he expected the room to defer to him, but the room had stopped deferring. Marcus Callahan, Reyes said, we have a warrant for your arrest on charges of wire fraud, forgery, and unauthorized transfer of trust assets. This is a misunderstanding, he said. You'll have an opportunity to address that, she replied. This is my family's home, he said louder. You can't walk in here. We can, she said simply. His wife stood up. My mother had started crying quietly. My father was staring at his plate like it held an answer. My brother turned to me. His expression was something I had never seen on him before. Not anger, not calculation, but something stripped of both. Something that looked almost like the actual version of him underneath everything else. You did this, he said. I looked at him. You did this. Reyes read him his rights while the other agents stood near the exits. My brother didn't resist physically. He was too precise for that, too aware of how things looked. He kept his voice controlled and kept insisting it was a misunderstanding right up until the handcuffs were on and his voice finally ran out of certainty. When they walked him out, my mother followed to the door and then stopped on the threshold, watching the agents guide him down the porch steps. The rain caught the light from the doorway in a thin silver curtain. Reyes paused beside me before she followed. Your parents will be questioned this week, she said. Prepare for that. I know, I said. She nodded once and walked out into the rain. I closed the door. The house was quiet in a way that felt irreversible, like something had been removed from it that had been holding up a particular kind of noise for a long time. My mother was still standing near the door. My father had not moved. He said without looking up, You could have talked to him first. He forged my name, I said. He's your brother. I picked up my coat from the chair by the stairs. He was. My mother made a sound that wasn't quite a word. I let myself out. The next several weeks moved with the specific rhythm of federal proceedings, which is to say slowly and without accommodation for the emotional timeline of the people involved. I flew back for my rotation and worked through it. My phone accumulated messages from my mother, from a lawyer my family hired who wanted to know if I would reconsider cooperating, from a cousin who called it a family matter that should have stayed one. I answered none of them. Reyes sent updates. My parents cooperated with investigators in exchange for reduced exposure. They had known about the documents. They had not known, they claimed, that the signatures were forged. The FBI assessed that claim as partially credible and moved forward accordingly. The title company employee's testimony held. The notary was located in a neighboring state and entered a guilty plea on related charges. The Delaware account was frozen, and the funds placed in escrow pending the outcome of the criminal trial. The buyers of the Clearwater and Riverside properties were contacted directly. They were a retired couple and a young family, respectively. neither of whom had known anything about the fraud. Both properties were placed into a legal hold during the investigation. Reyes kept me informed about their situation. That mattered to me. I needed to know they would be made whole. They were. Both were eventually cleared to remain in their homes under restructured arrangements pending resolution, and both received formal notification that the original transactions were being remedied through restitution proceedings. Not their fault. Not their problem to carry. My brother's attorney entered an early plea negotiation. He offered information about the title company's wider operations in exchange for leniency. Reyes said it was a predictable move. She also said it would not significantly reduce what he was facing. The trial date was set for early spring. I drove back for it. The courthouse was a plain building with no architectural ambition, the kind of structure that communicates process rather than significance. I sat in the gallery and watched my brother take the stand in a suit that was too carefully pressed, the way he had always understood the power of appearance. His attorney made the argument that he had acted with reasonable interpretation of his authority and with the family's best interests as his motivation. He framed my time away as a form of absence, suggesting that someone had needed to act and that my brother had simply been willing to do so. When it was my turn to testify, I answered the questions directly and without embellishment. I described the timeline. I described the documents. I described what my signature looked like and what the forged version had gotten wrong. I described the Delaware account and the timing of its creation. The prosecutor asked whether I had ever given my brother reason to believe he had authority over my personal assets. I said no. He asked whether my offshore schedule had made it difficult to manage my own finances. I said it had not. I had a financial advisor. I had a system. I had trusted my brother with a key to my parents' house, not the keys to my life. Across the room, my brother looked at his hands. The verdict came on a Thursday afternoon, guilty on all counts: wire fraud, forgery, unauthorized transfer of assets. The judge sentenced him to 4 years in federal prison with full restitution of the transferred funds. She noted during sentencing that premeditation had been established beyond reasonable dispute and that the exploitation of family trust as a mechanism for fraud was a particular category of harm that warranted the full weight of the exploitation of family trust. Ruling. My brother's wife was in the gallery. She didn't look at me. My parents hadn't come. I didn't know how to feel about that. I had stopped knowing how to feel about many things and had decided, somewhere in the middle of all of it, that not knowing was acceptable. That clarity was enough for now. Outside the courthouse, Reyes found me on the steps. She handed me a small folder, official paperwork, final documentation of the restitution order. We stood there for a moment while the city moved around us, unhurried and indifferent. "You held up well," she said. "I've held up through worse," I said. "Is that true, or is that just what you tell yourself?" I thought about it. "Both," I said. She almost smiled. She said the Bureau would be in touch about the restitution timeline and that I should expect the trust documents to be formally restored within 60 days. She shook my hand with the efficiency of someone who had many more cases waiting and walked down the steps without looking back. I stood there for a while longer. The city moved. The light changed. Somewhere nearby, someone was arguing about parking, the specific kind of ordinary argument that happens on days when the world is ending for someone else entirely. I drove back to my parents' house that evening to collect the last of the things I had left there over the years, which were fewer than I expected. A box of old textbooks. A framed photo from my first offshore assignment. A sweater I had stopped looking for 2 years ago and found folded in a drawer I rarely opened. My mother was in the kitchen. My father was in the living room with the news on low. Neither of them said much. My mother asked if I wanted tea. I said no. My father looked up once, and then back at the screen. I set my box down near the door and looked at the dining room. Same table, same chairs. The same configuration that had organized every holiday for as long as I could remember. The architecture of a family that had mistaken arrangement for closeness. I picked up my box and left. On the drive back to the hotel, I thought about what my brother had said to me that first night in the guest room doorway. That I had always needed everything explained twice. I thought about what I should have said, and then I thought about how it didn't matter anymore. How the right words for certain people come too late to help and just in time to release you from looking for them. 3 weeks later, I flew back to the offshore platform for my next rotation. The water was gray and wide and indifferent to everything that had happened. The work required my full attention, which was the thing I had always liked best about it. On my first evening out, I sat on the exterior walkway during the shift change and watched the horizon level itself against the water. The radio traffic on the platform was routine. The wind came from the south. I took out the small notebook I had carried through the whole ordeal and written almost nothing in. I thought about the Delaware account and the practice signature and my brother's expression when the handcuffs went on. I thought about the couple with the bikes in the riverside driveway. I thought about what trust actually costs when you find out it wasn't free. I wrote one line: "The people who take the most from you are usually the ones who told you to trust them." I closed the notebook and went inside. The platform hummed steadily beneath me, the machinery doing what it was built to do, reliable and indifferent to the particular grief of people. Out on the water, the night settled in completely. No city lights, no family noise. Just the sound of the sea holding everything up. It was enough. For now, it was exactly enough.